Okay, in this video, we're going to talk why term limits don't work. And it's going to be very, very simple because when we start to look at the actual debt, and we can actually look at the just solely from the actual president, we can actually see just along the years of the actual debt going along the years, we can see since the we've actually had it did get over 100%, but since then we actually had reduced it down, and even at 1980 we reduced it down to as low as a 34.65%. Going back to 2000, we actually raised it up to a 56.52%, and now it's sitting at 136.68%, actually the highest it's ever been in the United States' history, regardless of what actual amount of debt that we've actually had. Now, traditionally in the past, we've actually paid back our debt, but what we've had since since like the idea of 1980 to current is actually even slightly before, since we've gotten out the Bretton Woods Agreement, we've actually seen that the debt has actually only gotten for a president like Trump, who promised that he was going to cut the debt. He's not only not done that, he's actually done the exact opposite. Even on the amounts of relief that when he gave a stimulus package, that was actually the largest stimulus package, or actually largest spending bill, I should say, in the history of the country. When we start to look at the amount of spending that he's done, it's in record amounts. He's spending the record amounts on war, and we can actually see that we're getting record amounts of interest on the debt. And it's and when we start to get the amount of total, and we can see even though it is dropping down, we can state that our trade deficit with China is going down with it, but and our overall trade deficits overall down. But the fact is what Trump doesn't understand is that he doesn't understand that the trade deficit is merely between two countries. A country that doesn't produce as much is going to buy more goods, and that's just a matter of what ends up happening. Such as, I think the best example was given by Jo Jorgensen, Libertarian president, when it comes down to the trade deficit, where she says she has a huge trade deficit with her gas station, because she buys a bunch of gas, yet the gas company buys nothing, yet her huge trade deficit. That's the way things would go, because she's giving them cash and they're giving her a product. And that this is what ends up being created with that. Now, what's actually happening right now is this is something in which we can see that there is no stability on that. Now, what does this debt mean for the actual reasoning for the term limits? People are trying to people's argument has always been that we'll get people to uphold the Constitution term limits. Well, the fact is this is not going to change the amount of the people running with it, because we're still getting the same types of people running. We're still getting the same types of people spending the money, because over the years we've still gotten the same amounts of debt going up, yet these aren't the same people who have been running. It's different from Senate class to Senate class, and we know that this is much different because we can actually go in and see who's in each one, and we can see that they change. For my current district, District 1 in Wisconsin, we can see that that used to be Paul Ryan. It's now Brian Steele. And Paul Ryan used to be the speaker. Before then, he was higher up in leadership, and then now it's Brian Steele, who's merely just a representative from the area. And we see that when it comes down to it, is that we see that so he's not in anymore, and that we see the same policies are being implemented, and we see that the same pro-war, pro-welfare, big spending policies get implemented no matter who gets elected. And putting term limits is not going to do a damn thing. Putting term limits is only going to pull out, and going for it are merely these neoconservatives and neoliberals that basically know that they can get their huge pensions, they can duck right out, and they'll become an advocate for basically the same types of people, and they'll try to push for the same type of people there. Now, what would actually solve the problem is starting to end some of this spending and foreign lobbying in the actual city of DC. And the way to do this, you need to eliminate the idea of a mixed economy. And this is the only way it's going to happen. Term limits are not going to solve anything. And the only way it's going to solve anything is if you get electorate, which is the actual people voting, get them actually educated on who they're voting for, and vote for people who are actually going to uphold the Constitution as it's written, and not vote for people who are just going to be handing out a bunch of free stuff from either side of the aisle. And the more free stuff they keep doing, the more debt's going to go up, the more it's going to kill purchase power. Free stuff now, don't worry about tomorrow. And they're not being told they're getting from China and Russia are going to end, and that this is going to come to a complete end when we keep harassing countries like China and Russia, and they say, we're not going to buy any of your debts bonds anymore because we're sick and tired of being harassed and have sanctions put on our country and told we can't trade with you just because you don't like our actual countries. And what's going to happen is we're left with basically our highest buyer is going to be the postal retirees, and that's not going to be enough to support the actual debt that we have, because many times with a lot of the debt, and these fewer countries that are doing it, they're only doing it for political gain. When it comes down to influence, now we have the only other country that's doing this is Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia's even with them, they're cutting the amount that they're actually doing because of the implications that's happening with petroleum. And petroleum is not considered to be right now that stable of a investment. And this is the major thing, because there's cars are becoming a lot more fuel efficient, as well as there's other ideas for alternative fuels. And this is causing petroleum to be less and less stable. And we're seeing that there's alternative ways for countries to develop petroleum other than just through just drilling into sand, that we can act, which is reducing the price of petroleum. And this also changes the value that petroleum sits at, where they're not being able to push that petroleum where they can get it near that $100 a barrel or even higher than $100 a barrel. And this is a problem. Now when we see now this is what's going to impact that debt. Now when we see the idea of people trying to go after this of term limits, is you're only going to get term limits are basically only going to say who can and cannot run, and it's only going to be a restriction. And when we see what happens when we put restrictions on certain things, is it only makes things worse. and it only cuts down who you have access to uh, voting for in your area with it, because we've seen what happens when they've actually put restrictions. League of Voters actually created this thing of trying to limit people on the ballots. We used to have a lot of third party influence, and in many cases, they had just as equal of a shot when we had multiple parties. You'll look at other countries, and they have multiple parties on the ballot. You look at the Philippines. The Philippines actually have 6 major parties. But you look at us, we only have 2 major parties because they're actually fighting to keep the other ones off the ballot. And this is where we have a limited number of choices. And they're deliberately doing this because we find out in Texas, they're trying to keep libertarians off. We're seeing that Democrats are trying to keep the libertarians off because both are scared of the libertarian candidate for president. And this is because they don't want to act. Number one, we know that both Trump and Biden are actually scared to debate, the libertarian candidate being Joe Jorgensen. Now, when we look at the actual idea of term limits, this is only going to impact to an even greater degree. This is only to restrict people's access to who they can. And we should be well aware of that this is the whole purpose of this idea. It's the same idea of a constitutional convention. The constitutional convention is merely the idea of stripping down the rights and making everything into a privilege so that the government can actually delve out what people should have the ability to do and what they should not, and where we can actually tyrannical system. It's the same idea. And what we should view this as is this is merely an attack on that. And frankly, they should have never even put a term limit. I mean, if the people want a president to run for 10 terms, frankly, they should allow that. I mean, if a president wants to run for 10 terms, wants to go from like 35 to 95 years old, he should be able, if he or she should be able to do that. And that's frankly, they should be able to run from that point. And that's something in which should be fully legal. Now, what we have right now says, and frankly, with it, we shouldn't even be running even a primary system. We should just put everyone on the ballot. And if you look previously in our system, we didn't even have a primary system. We just basically put people on the ballot and you voted. And these were your choices for the general election. Whoever won. And there wasn't any there were no runoffs. It was just basically whoever won, and that was it. And this was the way elections went. And when we started to create this monopoly on the parties, this was this idea of trying to eliminate any form of freedom of choice. And we're in a situation now where this is basically another way of trying to eliminate freedom of choice, because we're seeing consolidation of ideas of when it comes down to news. We're seeing a lot of the so-called independent news starting to consolidate down to merely copying whichever brand of mainstream news that they want to look like. You have the more conservative ones are trying to copy what Fox News is doing. You have some of the more liberal ones that are back down into that rabbit hole of we're getting into this rabbit hole of not having freedom again because they are looking for clicks of this through mediocrity. And I think we need to end this, because the fact is we don't have this idea that freedom of choice is good from either spectrum. And people of the 2 major parties really know that the idea of freedom of choice would be damaging to either their things, because when we start to look at platforms, we start to what actually really matters. We can see that there is no difference. This is why when it comes down to why they're they're really not opposed to the idea of term limits. You eliminate the people with independent ideas because they don't come along as often, and those are more individuals. You eliminate the individuals so you can actually create this plethora of zombies that end up going into Congress and vote for the same old stuff that keeps going in and out, in and out, in and out. And so basically, so people get used to the same old garbage in, garbage out. And this is why the idea of term limits. You eliminate the idea of term limits, and you might actually get and you start killing some of these ideas of this like term limits for that and for the president. You eliminate the idea of limiting what parties can actually be viewed on the general debate stage. You're going to realize that people are going to be more up to vote for a lot of different ideas, and it's going to start killing the major parties, and you're going to have a plethora of ideas out there. Now, I don't care what ideas we're talking about. If you want communism out there with it, have communism. I don't support it, but hell, have it out there with it. Make communism, make the Libertarian Party, make the Justice Party, make the Constitution Party, do all these other parties out there with it. I want to see all of them out there. I want to see all of them debating, because frankly with it, I think that we can actually have a healthy debate stage out there. And don't eliminate anybody through these ideas of primaries. Primaries are stupid, and they basically force people to lock themselves into a certain party. And because they're trying to get people to support their candidate and then lock themselves into a party to vote them in the general election, thinking that they can get that to support the actual party, when many candidates are far different from one another. I mean, when we're talking about it, we look at Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not a conservative. He's moderate, right in the middle of the road. He has no libertarian views. He's he's not a statist. He's not a libertarian. He's not a conservative. He's not a liberal. He's right smack in the middle when we start to actually look at him. So he's basically mediocrity at its best. And we can see that he's within the last year, I'd say he's leaned to more statism type of ideas within last, I'd say 12 months. But I'd say overall with it is he's very, very, he's pretty much the idea of a centrist. There is nothing special about him. People calling him a conservative, that's about the biggest laugh I can actually think of. So when people were, when he was running in the primaries, he wasn't an actual conservative. So this is why we should have had everybody to choose from in the general election. People who wanted to vote for Rand Paul or Ted Cruz, or the neocons who wanted to vote for like Lindsey Graham with it, they could vote for Lindsey Graham. They should have been able to vote for all of them when in 2016. And then when it comes down to the next thing with it, is the party should not shut out anybody else that wants to go in the next thing. The party should not say, no, we've already decided who we're going to nominate, and then we're not going to allow really an actual serious run around on this time with it. Because the fact is, this is the problem with the nomination process, is they can basically block other people from actually doing anything, not have any debates, and basically so they can renominate their actual person who won the presidency and eliminate any type of challenge. And if you actually eliminated that and said, we're going to put everybody on the general debate, we're going to put everybody on the general election list and have everybody debate, it's going to change a lot of things, because then what you're going to have is you're going to have all of these people that are actually going to debate, and it's not going to be easy for someone that's the actual current president to fend all these ideas off. And it's going to make the best idea win, the idea that's actually popular. And when you start to do ideas of term limits are only going to restrict people. We don't want restrictions. And the same thing on the idea on Congress and Senate, or even going on local areas with it. We do not want any restrictions on people. Let them vote for whoever they want to vote for on on all the levels. Doesn't matter if they want to vote for him until the guy dies. I mean, hell, we've even had towns over the years vote for a dog as mayor. Frankly, with it is I think we can vote for a dog as president, and they would do a hell of a lot better than what we've had over the last several presidents, because we've had a lot of garbage. And I don't care about any of you who say Obama was a good president or Trump's a great president. Frankly, I don't care what people say with it. I know both of them are complete and utter garbage, and they've done massive damage to the actual country themselves. And I'm basically going to cut it here with it. Wait for my hate mail to come in with people disliking the video. I'm expecting that because I dared to diss people's favorite presidents with the last two, because people end up liking people like them as their Lord and Savior. And I'm going to cut it right here, and that's about it. And bye, everyone. And make sure to at least take a look at my Patreon at patreon.com/challenge history. If you can't donate, at least kind of share it on Twitter and Facebook. If you can't donate, I thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. Bye, everyone.